In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 things that you can do to figure out what to delegate and let go of so that you can free yourself up to focus on tasks that actually drive your business forward. And then I'm also going to talk to you about the delegation mindset and how to deal with some of those mental blocks, like the fear and anxiety that comes with worrying about what if people make mistakes or don't follow through. My name's Byron Morrison. I'm the author of The Effective CEO, and I help first-time CEOs take control and become more effective in their role. So if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Every week, I speak to first-time CEOs who tell me they have so much to do, there's not enough minutes in the day to get it all done. When we really start breaking it down, though, it's clear that so much of their time is spent in tasks that they shouldn't actually be involved in. And this is a huge problem because this tendency to take on too much and overload themselves leaves them feeling stretched thin and overwhelmed, where they're spending most of their days working in the business instead of on what's actually going to drive growth. Now, they know they should be delegating more, but a lot of the time they don't actually know what they should be letting go of. And a big part of this is because they haven't clearly defined their roles and their responsibilities and the key things that should be done by them. And that's why the 3 steps I'm going to take you through are going to help you do exactly that. So the first thing we need to figure out is, what is your zone of genius? Imagine for a moment you and I are sitting down having a conversation and I ask you, what is your greatest skill set? Like, looking objectively at the business, where does your time have the greatest impact? What are the things that can only be done by you? Where, if you put your full focus and energy, are you actually going to be able to drive things forward? You really need to figure this out, because a lot of the time I have conversations with first-time CEOs where they ask me, what should a CEO be doing? And the honest answer is, it depends. Yes, you need to be focusing on strategy and pushing the vision forward, but every CEO is different. Some might have a strength in marketing, some in product, some in sales and business development. This is why you really need to figure out where is the area that you flourish, because by knowing that, you're going to have a better idea of, okay, this is my skill set, this is where I am the most effective in the business, and then knowing that, you can start to hire around your weaknesses and the things that you don't want to be doing. So take some time to think about, like, what is your zone of genius? Where do your skills really align with actually driving the business forward? And you can also look back historically, like, what did you do to get this business off the ground? Where did you really have the skills that got you to where you are? Figure that out, and then in a moment we'll come back to this when I talk to you about how to audit your tasks and what you take on. The second thing that you can do is to, again, look objectively at the business and the key things that are on your to-do list and really honestly ask yourself, which of this can only be done by you? There's going to be tasks that as a CEO have to be things that only you take on. And this is why you really need to start auditing and gaining clarity on, okay, these are the key priorities. They may not all fall within your zone of genius, but they're things that only you can take on. Knowing that, we can then start to defend your time to make sure that you actually have the attention to move them forward. The third way you can do this is by looking at it through the lens of the financial cost and output. Because the reality is, everything you do in the business has a cost. Every hour you spend in one thing is an hour that's coming at the expense of something else. And this is why it's so important to start to recognize where you're spending your days. Because if you're being pulled into lower level tasks, ultimately this is going to have a huge cost, not just to revenue, but to growth and to impact, and ultimately the life that you can create. I'll give you an example of this and then I'll talk you through it. There was a CEO that I was working with, and one day we got on a coaching call and I could tell they was notably stressed out. And I assumed it was because I knew that he had a big board meeting coming up that he needed to prepare for. But when we started talking about it, he started to tell me about how he was overwhelmed trying to figure out everything he needed to do for an upcoming business trip. He needed to book the flights, arrange the itinerary, sort a car and accommodation. And understandably, he's just on edge with everything he needed to do. And I really had to stop and challenge him for a moment, because while this was important, it shouldn't have been done by him. Actually, this is an exact reason why a few months prior, he'd hired an assistant. But the problem was, he was so used to doing these tasks, he hadn't stopped to think about whether or not he actually should. And this is why it's so important that you take the time to really look at what you're doing. Because the way I always advise clients to think about this is to figure out, what is an hour of your time worth? Let's say, for argument's sake, to keep it simple, it's $1,000. Well, looking at it through that lens, you shouldn't be doing tasks that you could pay someone else $30 an hour to do. Like with that client example, with him arranging all of his travel itinerary, he could be actually getting someone else to do that. So him spending time on that, even though it may only take an hour, is costing him and the business money. Not only that, he's also losing all of this time stressing and worrying about it, which is energy that he's taking away from something else. This is why you need to become more deliberate of really figuring out where does your time have the greatest impact. So you've figured out your zone of genius. You know what tasks can only be done by you. You've looked at the lower level tasks that you need to get off your plate. What now? Well, we need to go through a process of auditing where you're spending your time to know what you're actually doing with your days. So there's two ways that I advise that you approach this. The first is to sit down and look at the last 2 to 3 weeks. Go back through your diary, your meetings, the things that you had on your plate, and really ask yourself, was this a good use of your time? Was this something that you should have been involved in? Is this a reoccurring thing that going forward you need to delegate and get off your plate? The reason why this is so important is when you're a founder or a manager and you first step into the role, you're probably going to be involved in everything. If anything, you need to in order to build momentum and grow. But as the business starts to scale, your role actually needs to become more honed in. And what a lot of first-time CEOs get wrong is they don't stop to think about whether or not they should still be involved in these various different tasks. And that's why all the time I talk to new clients who are pulled into meetings or different things going on, and they haven't stopped to consider, now that they've built a team around them, whether or not they still need to actually be doing them. So take some time to look back over the last few weeks and really think about which of these are no longer things that you should actually be doing. So that's the first part of it. Go back and audit old tasks and things you were pulled into to figure out, okay, what do you need to get out of? Then from there, it's time to shift your focus to the present and the future. Go through your current to-do list and really look at it and ask yourself, is this actually important? As in, will getting this done drive the business forward, lead to more revenue and growth, or is it kind of busy work and a waste of time? If it's not important, then it needs to be removed. If it is important, does it need to be done by you? Going back to knowing what your zone of genius is and the key tasks that have to be driven forward, then you can start making a decision of, do you know what, actually, this should be done by someone else. Maybe it needs to be delegated to your CFO or another member of your team. Take the time now to figure out, okay, how do I need to communicate this? Who do I need to get off my plate to? And that's going to allow you to free yourself up. I'll give you an example of this. I had a client come to me completely overwhelmed with this to-do list. He was a first-time CEO. He was stuck in the weeds and spinning his wheels. And I got him to create a list of everything he had going on. And he came to me with a to-do list with 46 items on it. It's no wonder he was just feeling overwhelmed by everything happening. But as we started to go through it, so many of these items didn't need to be done by him. Like one of them, he had an event coming up, and one of the things he needed to do was to reach out to a few people to invite them. Again, important, but he had an assistant. This is not something that as a CEO, he should have been involved in. By us going through and auditing it and figuring out, was it important? Should it be done by him? If not, who could take it over? We managed to reduce that to-do list by over half. And we also started to then look at processes going forward that he could really audit these things before they got put on his plate so that he could have an easier time delegating and letting go. So this is something I really encourage you to do every single week and also every single day. When you're going into the week, look at what you have coming up, the meetings that you're in, the tasks that you've got on your plate, and really again, going through it, ask yourself, is this important? Does this need to be done by you, or could this be done by someone else? Then do the same thing in the morning. Look at your day ahead. What meetings do you have on? What tasks have you got on the to-do list? And figure out where could you delegate and let go. The few minutes that you spend here can save you hours every single week. In fact, I regularly find it with the CEOs I work with that once we go through this and we get them clear on what they need to prioritize, the right processes in place to delegate and let go, and how to structure and manage their time, they often get back anything from 5 to 15 hours a week. And I've seen more extreme examples where I've helped CEOs free up 20, 25 hours every single week, which is then time they can focus on growth, on scaling the business, on creating more impact, and just having freedom to enjoy life and spend it with their family. That's why I really encourage you to take some time to figure this out, because it's going to give you so much more control over your days. I do go into this a little bit further in a training that I've got called the CEO time audit process, and you can watch that for free using the link in the description of the video. So we've talked about delegation and what to get off your plate, and you may be sat there thinking, yeah, this all makes sense. I know I need to delegate more, but people aren't going to be able to follow through. They're going to make mistakes. No one can do it as well as I can. That's why I want to talk to you about some of the mental barriers that I see with my one-to-one clients that you need to overcome if you actually want to execute on this properly. So the first one is the concern that there's no one in the business who can take over this task. This is quite a common one. It's a little bit more difficult to fix, but knowing this, it means that you need to factor into your planning and your KPIs and goals for the next 90 days or 6 months, whatever it is, that you need to either upskill someone or this has to be your new hire. Because the reality is you will at times figure out things that you shouldn't be doing, but there's not going to be someone to hand it off to. A perfect example of this came up with a client where he had a financial aspect because he had a finance background and he was being pulled into it, but he really didn't want to do it. They were busy onboarding a new CFO and he knew that it was going to take her kind of 3 months to settle into the role. So knowing that, we looked at it, okay, this is one of the things he needs to get off his plate. It's not going to be straight away, but that's okay. He at least knew that was something they actively needed to be working on to upskill the member of his team so that he could let it go. So it's still powerful to know the things you shouldn't be involved in, but you may not always be able to remove them straight away. The second mental block to think about is people aren't going to be able to do it as well as you. The reality is they may not be able to be. But you need to overcome this mentality that everything needs to be perfect. Remember, great companies were not built by one person. They were built by a team. And this is why, yes, you may be able to do it at perfect and to this amazing standard, but that doesn't mean that what other people are doing is subpar. And again, it comes back to what is the cost of you doing it yourself. I'll give you another example of this. I've got a client who he does a lot of presentations and he's really good at PowerPoint and putting together all of these kind of pictures and stuff. And he was worried that members of his team can't do it to the same standard as him. And it's like, yeah, but does it really matter? Like no one sat there in the meeting coming out of it being like, wow, those were some amazing slides. I'm so excited by that. It's like, no, it's the information that's important. If it still looks good, like I'm not saying accept subpar, low quality, mediocre work here, but you need to be at peace with what is an acceptable standard and then allow yourself to figure out, okay, that's okay. I can deal with that. And my time's better spent on this. The third mental block is what if people make mistakes and there's huge consequences and ramifications? This is a very real problem and something that you do need to be kind of cautious on. I'll give you an example of this and I'll talk you through it. There was a client that I was working with, which one of these things he was being involved in was a lot of data and reporting, which was being sent to their biggest client. And this client was responsible for 90% of their revenue. He was so worried that if they made a mistake or they lost their business, the company could go under. So I know me telling him, just let it go and delegate it, wasn't good advice because the reality is he would have so much anxiety and stress, it would keep him awake at night and he wouldn't be able to stop thinking about it. So what we did instead was we implemented a process to gradually let it go. We figured out, okay, who are 2 people in the company who are skilled to do this? What we then did is we executed a plan where one of them would take it over, they would get it done, and then the other person above them would take time to thoroughly check it every single month. Then from there, it was sent to my CEO client and he would do a third check himself just to make sure that everything was in place. I know this veers a little bit into the realm of micromanaging, but it's what this client needed to be at peace because we made an agreement that when he had 3 months where it came to him with no mistakes, that would be a point where he could then feel comfortable letting it go. So this is one of those things to think about. Okay, if you do need to delegate it, what accountability do you need in place? How do you really set the expectations and make sure that people are getting it done to the standard that you need to? Getting this in place is going to be out of the realm of what we can go into this video because it is very situational dependent and I'd need to know more about what's going on before I could give you direct guidance and support. But just to give you a top level understanding, in order to effectively delegate and bring out the best in your team, you need to be clear at communicating what's expected and needed to get done. You need feedback loops in place to make sure everyone's on the same page and things are moving forward. And you also need accountability to make sure that people actually follow through. These processes are a big part of what I help first-time CEOs with in my Evolve program, where I work directly with them to help them take control and become more effective in their role. So if you want to find out more about the Evolve program and how I can potentially help you, you can do so using the link in the description of this video. And the final mental block that we need to overcome is that the people around you aren't going to be able to do it. Whenever a CEO tells me that they're worried that their team aren't going to be able to get it done, either it's a case that they haven't hired effectively, in which case that's a completely different issue. We need to go back to the foundational level of how they're really picking their team and bringing the right people on board. Or it's a case that they haven't given people the opportunity to step up. Because if you've hired great people, you know that they can do their job. A lot of the time, the reason why they're not getting results is you haven't trusted them to follow through. You haven't given them the opportunity to really prove themselves. This goes back to really allowing people, once you've communicated what needs to get done, to go and actually do it. Yes, they might make mistakes, but that's how they're going to learn and figure it out along the way. This in itself also comes from the culture that a lot of first-time CEOs make, where they're so quick to dive into things or to solve other people's problems that people just know that they're going to do it, that they don't stop and think for themselves. This is why if you want to be effective at delegating, you need to set a boundary in place where you don't just take things over. One of my favorite ways to do this is when a client comes to me saying people keep dumping problems on their plate, is pushing them that they need to actually challenge them and say to them, look, I understand there's a problem here. I want you to go away, research what can happen, come up with 3 potential solutions, and then come to me with your recommendation of what needs to get done. What this does is it forces someone to actually think about what are the potential solutions and could be going on, which is going to give them a whole new level of confidence in actually showing you what they need to do. So remember, if you're worried that the people around you aren't going to be able to do it, but you also feel like, do you know what, I've got a great team, then the problem is probably down to the way that you're communicating and allowing people to get stuff done. So you need to get out of your own way and allow people to actually step up and prove themselves. So there you have it. 3 ways that you can figure out what you need to delegate and get off your plate, and some other ways that you can deal with some of the fear and anxiety that comes with letting go. If you do want to dive into any of these topics further, check out my book, The Effective CEO, because it covers a lot of what I've spoken about in this video in more detail. And if you do have any questions, feel free to just drop me an email using my email address in the description of this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like and hit the subscribe button. I've been Byron Morrison, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.